"You're not invited," she said, smiling like a knife hidden in lipstick. The wedding invitation still sat in my mailbox, blank. No name, no address, no mother. The way she said it wasn't cruel, it was casual, like denying someone air and pretending it's just weather. I felt the floor shift under me, though I hadn't moved. My boy, my baby, standing beside her, quiet as the wallpaper. The one I carried through storms and hunger now couldn't lift his eyes to meet mine. The chandelier hummed, catching sunlight like tears frozen mid-fall. Somewhere, the gospel radio whispered, "Take your burdens to the Lord." But I didn't. I took notes. "Ma," he said finally, voice thin as thread, "it's just, she wants it small. Private. Private." That word sank into me like a key turning the wrong way. "Private?" I repeated, slow, deliberate. "That's what y'all call it now, when family gets cut out?" Lena, that's her name, smoothed her hair and said, "It's not personal, it's just modern." Modern? Ain't that something? They say modern when they mean heartless, private when they mean ashamed, and love when they mean temporary. I looked at her, the white nails, the borrowed ring, the purse that cost more than their rent, and I remembered every dollar I paid to keep them standing. $550 a month, 38 months straight. That's $2,900 in mercy. $2,900 that now sat in her hair, her shoes, her smile. My son shifted. "We'll record it for you," he mumbled. A recording. Like I was dead already. The kitchen clock ticked too loud. The air smelled like burnt toast and endings. When I finally spoke, it wasn't with anger. It was with clarity. I said, "I used to wonder what I'd give y'all as a wedding gift." I walked to the drawer and pulled out a single gold key, their mortgage key, the one I co-signed, the one still in my name. Her smile flickered. Just a second, but I saw it. That twitch of fear when a woman realizes kindness had a contract. Later that night, I brewed sweet tea, sat by the window, and thought about how silence can be louder than screams. They didn't want me at that wedding, but the bank did, and the bank always sends an invitation with a due date. So I checked the paperwork, late fees stacked like unspoken apologies. They'd missed 3 months. My boy was too proud to ask, but pride don't pay interest. I called Mr. Franklin at the branch, the same man who'd known me since I was 20 and pregnant and scared. "Evenin', Helen," he said. "You still got co-ownership on that Jefferson Street house." "I sure do," I said, calm as a hymn. "I'd like to visit my property." He chuckled, not understanding. But I wasn't laughing. I printed every page of that loan agreement, slid them into a brown envelope like scripture, and wrote on the front, "Invitation accepted." Signed. The bank. Sunday came. The church bells sang for someone else's happiness. But I was busy ironing my dress. Cream lace, gold brooch. The same outfit I wore the day I bought that house for them. By noon, I stood in the courthouse parking lot watching a black limousine gleam like a lie. Inside, they were saying vows, while my name sat on their roof like a shadow. I didn't need a front row seat. I had something better. Power written in fine print. When they walked out, rice flying, cameras flashing, I smiled from across the street, holding that envelope. Her eyes met mine. For the first time, she looked small, not cruel, just scared. "Congratulations," I called out. She froze. My son looked between us, confused. "I just dropped something off for you," I said, and nodded toward the man in the gray suit, Mr. Franklin, handing her the notice. Her bouquet slipped from her hand. Pink petals scattered across the courthouse steps like lost chances. "You're not invited," she'd said. And she was right. I wasn't invited. I was involved. There's a difference. See, I don't crash weddings. I audit them. And baby, when you play with people's kindness, you better check who signed the loan. The car door closed behind them. They drove away fast, like guilt had a GPS. The street went quiet. I watched that envelope flutter in the wind, then land on the steps where her bouquet had fallen. It looked poetic, like justice dressed in white. I sipped my tea, smiled slow, and whispered, "May the church say paid in full." That night, the moon looked like a witness, bright, watchful, and too quiet for comfort. I sat on my porch, gospel radio low, the hum of crickets stitching through the silence. Every now and then, I'd look down at the stack of bank papers resting on my lap. Thin pages, heavy truth. People think revenge is fire. But sometimes, baby, it's math. It's columns and signatures, interest rates and dates that don't lie. It's mercy, itemized. 2 days later, the call came. "Miss Helen, this is Lena," she said, voice trembling, soft but sour. "I think there's been a mistake with the—" I cut her off gently, the way a teacher stops a child before they embarrass themselves. "No mistake, sugar. Just a matter of ownership." "But we made all our payments," she stammered. "Maybe you think you did," I said, "but that paper says otherwise." Silence stretched so long I could hear her thinking. Then faintly, "Why would you do this?" I took a deep breath, feeling the sweetness of justice mix with the ache of love. "Because, baby," I said, "you don't slam a door that someone else paid to build." That line must have stuck, because the next day, Max, my son, showed up. Same brown eyes he had when he was little, but now full of pride, guilt, and the kind of fear men learn when love turns expensive. He didn't knock, just walked in. "Ma," he said, his voice tight, "you didn't have to do that." "Didn't I?" I asked. He stared, jaw clenched. "We would have fixed it." I smiled slow. "With what? Her wedding nails?" He flinched, because he knew I wasn't talking about money anymore. I poured him tea, the way I used to when he was 16 and too tired to talk. We sat in silence. He kept looking at the floor, like the answers were hidden in the linoleum. Finally, he said, "She thought you looked down on her." I laughed, the kind of laugh that hurts the ribs. "I looked down, all right, from the balcony I paid for." He winced. "She's my wife now." "And I'm your mother forever," I said. "Difference is, one of us was chosen and one of us was earned." He looked up then, the way he used to when he wanted forgiveness. "I just wanted peace, Ma." "Peace don't come cheap," I said softly. "It costs respect." He didn't answer. When he left, he didn't say goodbye, just the sound of a door closing, slow, tired, ashamed. Weeks passed. Rumors started crawling like ants in sugar. Folks at church whispered that I'd embarrassed my boy. Maybe I did, but when a mother teaches boundaries, it ain't embarrassment. It's education. One Sunday, Pastor Daniels pulled me aside. "Sister Helen," he said kindly, "sometimes forgiveness is the bigger blessing." I looked at him with that old Sunday school smile. "Pastor," I said, "sometimes forgiveness is just a receipt that ain't due yet." He blinked. Didn't have a verse ready for that one. Then one evening, almost 2 months later, I found a letter in my mailbox. The handwriting was careful, shaky, like it had cried before it dried. It said, "Dear Mama, I know I hurt you. I didn't see what she was doing until it was too late. She's gone now. Took what she could and left me with the rest. I lost the house, but I found my lesson. Can I come home for a while? Love, Max." I read it twice, then a third time, just to feel the ache turn into peace. The porch light flickered on, catching the gold edges of that letter. I thought about every sleepless night, every prayer whispered into the dark, and I smiled. When he came back, I didn't open my arms right away. I opened the door, let him walk through the same threshold his pride once closed. He looked older, not in years, but in knowing. "Hey, Ma. Hey, baby." He looked around like the house itself was forgiving him. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "Good," I said. "Now you can start healing." He laughed a little. "You always gotta have the last word." "Somebody's gotta finish the sermon," I said. Later, as we sat on that same porch, he asked, "You ever regret it, Ma? Doing what you did?" I sipped my tea. Let the crickets answer first. Then I said, "Regret? No. Timing? Maybe. See, love ain't about letting people hurt you twice." He nodded slow, eyes wet but proud. "I think I get it now," he whispered. "Good," I said, patting his hand. "Then maybe you'll teach your children better." The night felt lighter after that, like forgiveness had walked in and set down her suitcase. But before bed, I looked one last time at that deed on my dresser, the one now stamped closed. Not revenge, just resolution, justice signed in ink and wisdom. And I whispered into the quiet, "They said I wasn't invited. But baby, I owned the building." Time don't heal everything. Sometimes it just teaches you how to walk without limping in public. 3 months after Max came home, the leaves started turning gold. Same color as the ring he pawned to pay off the last of the loan. He didn't tell me, but I knew. A mother always knows the quiet kind of pain, the kind a man hides under a half smile and a coffee mug. Every morning he'd fix the porch rail, paint the shutters, or trim the hedges. Like if he just worked hard enough, he could build back the parts of himself he'd lost. I didn't stop him. Redemption's a kind of sweat. Then one Saturday, while I was snapping green beans at the kitchen table, I heard the sound of tires crunching the driveway gravel. I looked up, and there she was, Lena. Hair different, but that same snakeskin confidence dressed up as humility. She stood at the gate, one hand clutching her purse, like it was her last lifeline. "Miss Helen," she called, her voice sugar thin. "Can I talk to you?" The radio was playing "His Eye is on the Sparrow." I didn't answer right away. I let the song finish. Then I stepped outside, slow, calm, steady, like judgment with good posture. "What brings you here, baby?" I asked, even though I already knew. Her eyes darted, restless, searching for sympathy that didn't live here anymore. "I came to apologize," she said softly. "Things didn't go like I thought." I smiled, not unkind, but unshaken. "Oh, they went exactly like you thought. You just didn't think long enough." She swallowed hard. "I made mistakes." "Didn't we all?" I said. "Difference is, mine didn't come with eviction notices." She took a deep breath. "Max told me what you did for him. I just wanted to say I'm sorry." I tilted my head. "You sorry for what you did or for what it cost you?" Her silence told the truth. Remorse don't sound like words. It sounds like silence after pride dies. I looked at her one last time, saw the trembling under the makeup, the hunger behind the apology. She wasn't here to make peace. She was here to reclaim pity. "Lena," I said softly, "forgiveness ain't a refund, it's a release. I already forgave you. You just too late to matter." She flinched like the words were hot. Then, under her breath, she whispered, "He still loves me." I smiled. He might, but love without lessons is just repetition. That's when she broke, tears running through the powder on her face, smudging her mask till she finally looked human. And for a brief second, I saw the girl she used to be, scared, selfish, desperate to be seen. "Go home, baby," I said gently, "whatever home means to you now." She nodded, backing away slow, eyes wide, chest shaking. When she reached her car, she turned back once more, like maybe I'd stop her. But I didn't. Some stories don't need a sequel. That night, Max asked, "She came by, didn't she?" I didn't answer. He sighed, eyes glistening in the lamplight. "She said she's sorry." "Good for her," I said. "Now let's see if she learned." He nodded, quiet, then looked out the window. "Ma, you ever wish things could go back?" I took my time before answering. "No, baby. Back is where blindness lives. Forward's where you start seeing clear." Weeks rolled by. Max got a new job at the courthouse, fixing records and scanning deeds. Funny, ain't it? The same papers that broke him now paying his bills. Life's got a rhythm God himself would envy. He started smiling again. Slow, honest, unperformed. The kind that don't need applause. One Sunday morning, he brought me coffee in bed. Strong, sweet, and steaming. "Ma," he said, "you know what I learned?" I looked up from my Bible. "What's that, baby?" He smiled. "Mercy's just justice with good manners." I laughed so hard I almost spilled my cup. "Boy, if you keep talking like that, you'll be running sermons by Christmas." Then came the letter. A thick white envelope with government print. Notice of property sale. Foreclosure redemption opportunity. Turns out the Jefferson Street house, the one I helped them buy, was up for auction. Max sighed, folding the paper. "Guess that's the last chapter, huh?" "Not quite," I said. "Sometimes God lets you lose something just so he can let you buy it back cleaner." He frowned. "What you mean?" I smiled slow. "It's called poetic justice, baby, the kind you can frame." 2 weeks later, I put on my Sunday best and went down to that courthouse auction. Men in suits, women in perfume that cost too much for their souls, all bidding like buzzards circling a carcass. I stood there, calm, patient, holding my checkbook. When the clerk said, "Jefferson Street, starting bid $60,000, I raised my hand. The crowd murmured. Another man tried to outbid. I let him, once, twice. Then, right before the gavel fell, I whispered to the clerk, "Let's make it $85,000, cash." The room went silent. The gavel hit wood. Sold. And just like that, I owned the house they once told me I wasn't invited to. When I walked out into the sunlight, the wind carried the faint echo of church bells. Maybe a wedding, maybe a warning. Either way, I smiled. Because, baby, sometimes revenge ain't about hurting back. It's about buying peace at market value. That night, I unlocked that house again. It smelled like dust and memory. The walls still had faint marks where pictures used to hang. Their laughter, their dreams, their lies. I walked room to room, barefoot, letting the floor remember me. Then I whispered, "I'm home now." The first night back inside that house felt strange, like walking through a ghost that still remembered your footsteps. I turned on one lamp, just one, and the whole place exhaled. Dust motes floated through the air, slow as forgiveness. The floors creaked like they were whispering, "Welcome home, Helen. We missed your kind of quiet." I smiled. It wasn't revenge anymore. It was reclamation. Next morning, I opened every window and let the sunlight flood in. The curtains swayed like choir robes in a Sunday breeze. I could still smell her perfume faintly in the master bedroom. Sweet, expensive, temporary. So I burned sage, then brewed coffee strong enough to make angels hum. That house had seen lies, laughter, and eviction notices. But now it was going to see peace. I moved slow, room by room, restoring what was mine. Not with anger, but with intention. New sheets, fresh paint, a gospel hum in every corner. Later that week, Max stopped by after work. He stood at the doorway, cap in hand, a little nervous. "Didn't think you'd ever set foot in here again," he said. I looked around. Neither did I, but turns out peace has a key too. He nodded, eyes glassy. "Feels different." "It should," I said. "When something's been bought with pain, the walls don't echo the same." He walked through slowly, touching the kitchen counter, the banister, the window frame, all the things he once took for granted. Then he turned to me. "Can we keep it this time, Ma?" I smiled. "We will, but not as a house, as a lesson." That Sunday, I hosted dinner there. First one in years. Nothing fancy. Fried chicken, collard greens, sweet tea, and cornbread, thick enough to hold a memory. The neighbors came, Pastor Daniels too. When everyone bowed their heads to pray, I said, "Lord, thank you for letting me see what broken looks like before you showed me what whole feels like." The whole table murmured, "Amen," in that soft southern harmony that feels like home. Halfway through dinner, someone knocked on the door. When I opened it, there stood a young woman in a simple blue dress, holding a notepad. "Miss Helen," she asked, "I'm from the Herald. We heard you bought your family's house back after it was foreclosed. Folks been talking." I chuckled. "Good things, I hope." She grinned. "Depends who you ask." "Then sit down, baby," I said. "Let me feed you before you write." We talked for hours. She asked about forgiveness, about family, about money, and I told her the truth, plain as cornbread. Mercy without memory ain't wisdom. It's repetition. Love don't mean letting folks disrespect your sacrifice. Sometimes the only way to teach peace is to charge interest on pain. She scribbled fast, eyes wide, tears glimmering by the time I finished. When she left, she hugged me tight and said, "You just wrote my Sunday headline." A week later, that article came out. Mother buys back her son's house, calls it God's way of balancing books. It went viral across the county. People stopped me in grocery aisles. Some hugged me, some whispered gossip, but every face carried respect, even the ones that used to pity me. That night, Max showed me his phone. "Ma," he said, half laughing, half crying, "you're trending." I looked at the headline, then at him. "I didn't need the world to see, baby. I just needed you to." He nodded, tears glistening. "I do, Ma. I really do." We sat there on that front porch, the same one where my heart once broke, watching the sunset turn the sky into a sermon. The crickets started their nightly choir, and I said softly, "You know, Max, the devil don't always wear horns. Sometimes he wears vows and perfume." He chuckled. "And heels, too." I smiled. "Don't forget heels, baby. The higher they are, the faster they fall." Then I leaned back, eyes on the horizon. "Funny thing, though," I whispered. "I didn't just get a house back. I got myself back. And that, baby, was worth more than any mortgage." 2 months after that article, folks in town started calling me the woman who repossessed her peace. Some said it like praise, others like warning. Either way, it fit, because peace ain't something you wait for, baby. It's something you reclaim, brick by brick, prayer by prayer. The Jefferson Street house was shining again. Fresh paint, trimmed hedges, curtains open wide like forgiveness that finally learned boundaries. But the real healing wasn't in the walls. It was in me. One afternoon, I was sweeping the porch when I saw Miss Thelma from down the road walking up slow with her cane. Her gossip radar always came before her shadow. "Well, look at you," she said, eyes twinkling, "sitting in the same house they tried to take from you." I smiled. "Ain't that just God's sense of humor?" She laughed, raspy and sweet. I always said you had a little preacher in you, Helen." I leaned on the broom. "Oh, I got a lot of preacher, Miss Thelma. I just save my sermons for when the lesson's already paid for." That evening, I opened the front window and looked out at the street. Same neighborhood, same people. But everything felt different. See, when you survive betrayal, the world don't shrink. You just stop chasing small places. I'd learned to stop apologizing for taking up space in rooms I built. For years, I'd been everyone's safety net. Now I was learning to be my own foundation. Then one morning, Max came in holding a letter. "Ma," he said, voice trembling, "you got a notice from the bank again." I raised an eyebrow. "Again?" He nodded and handed it over. I opened it slow, but instead of numbers and deadlines, there was a note on fancy letterhead. "Miss Helen, the bank would like to invite you to speak at our Women in Finance luncheon. Your story has inspired countless clients and staff. Enclosed is an honorarium for your time. Sincerely, James Franklin, Branch Director." I laughed. Deep, belly full, the kind that shakes the dust off your spirit. "Lord," I said, "you really do have jokes." Max grinned. "Guess you got invited this time, huh?" I winked. "Baby, I got paid to show up." That luncheon was something else. A room full of women in heels and suits, clapping like they'd been waiting to hear a story with blood in it. When I took that stage, I didn't bring notes, I brought truth. I told them about the kitchen where I stood, heart cracked but spine straight, about the checkbook that became my Bible, about the house that turned from a battlefield into a blessing. And I said, mercy's not weakness, it's just patience waiting on paperwork. Forgiveness don't erase history, it edits the ending. And baby, if kindness don't come back with respect, send it a bill. The room went quiet, then wild with applause. But I wasn't chasing applause. I was chasing closure. Afterward, a young woman approached me, maybe 25, nervous but determined. She said, Miss Helen, my mama always said never mix love with money, but what if it's family? I looked her dead in the eye. Then make sure the love's worth more than the loan. She nodded, tears forming. Thank you, she whispered. I squeezed her hand. Don't thank me yet, baby. Just learn early what I learned late. Back home that evening, the sunset was soft and pink, like an apology from the sky. Max sat beside me on the porch, sipping lemonade. Ma, he said quietly, I saw Lena today. My hand stilled. Oh? She's back in town. Said she's working at the diner now. She asked about you. I stared at the horizon. What'd you tell her? He hesitated. I told her you're doing fine. Good, I said, because I am. He looked down. You ever think about forgiving her for real? I smiled, slow and knowing. Forgiveness already happened, baby, but trust is a gate you don't open twice. That night, I couldn't sleep. The moonlight hit the picture frames on the wall. Max as a baby, his graduation, his wedding, and then nothing. A gap where I used to belong. I walked through the house one more time, barefoot, tracing my fingers over the walls. Then I whispered to the empty air, you taught me my worth, even if you had to hurt me to show it. The floor creaked back, like it agreed. And right then, I realized something deep. Betrayal ain't the end of a story. It's the punctuation before the testimony. Because pain with purpose? That's just experience with a sermon. The days after that felt quiet. Not the heavy kind of quiet, but the kind that hums like peace when it's learning to breathe again. Every morning, I'd walk through that Jefferson Street house barefoot, letting the wood remember the rhythm of forgiveness. Some mornings, I'd still hear echoes, laughter from another time, footsteps from a woman I used to be, but they didn't hurt anymore. They just reminded me I'd survived. See, peace don't come wrapped in silence. It comes in understanding that you don't need closure from people who can't even spell accountability. One Friday afternoon, I was in the backyard hanging laundry when I heard the rattle of an old engine pulling up out front. It was Max's truck, and beside him, stepping out slow, was Lena. I froze. Not from fear, from curiosity. Like watching a page you thought was torn out suddenly rewrite itself. She looked different. No diamonds, no expensive perfume, no proud tilt in her chin. Just jeans, a plain shirt, and eyes that had finally seen their own reflection. Miss Helen, she said quietly, I know I shouldn't have come. I folded the towel in my hands, deliberate, calm. And yet, here you are. She nodded. I didn't come to ask for anything. I came to give something. That piqued my interest. Go on. She reached into her bag and pulled out a worn photo. Me, Max, and her. Smiling at a barbecue years ago, before all the lies. I found this when I moved out, she said. Thought it was lost. I took the photo, my fingers brushing hers. For the first time, her touch didn't feel like ice. It felt like apology. I was wrong, she whispered. About you, about him, about everything. I thought love was control. You knew it was patience. I studied her face. No makeup could hide truth this raw. You learned, I said softly. That's something. She nodded. I ain't looking for forgiveness. I just didn't want the last thing between us to be hate. Max stood off to the side, arms crossed, eyes full of history he didn't know how to hold. I looked at him, then back at her. "Well," I said, "Haight left this house the day the bank called me ma'am again." She blinked, then smiled. Small, tired, real. "I'm glad you got it back," she said. "I didn't get a house back," I said. "I got dignity back. That's harder to buy." She nodded, then turned to leave. Halfway down the driveway, she stopped and called out, "You really did win, Miss Helen." I shook my head. "No, baby, I just stopped losing myself." That night, after they left, I sat on the porch under a sky that looked like wet velvet, black and endless, dotted with grace. I thought about the years that brought me here, all the ways love can bruise and still teach you how to stand tall. And I realized revenge had changed its face. It wasn't about payback anymore. It was about peace with interest. The next morning, the phone rang. It was Pastor Daniels. "Sister Helen," he said, "that speech you gave at the bank, someone from the community college heard it. They want you to speak at their Women's Empowerment Forum." I chuckled. "Well, tell them I'll come. But I don't do PowerPoints. I do parables." He laughed. "They'll take whatever you bring." At that event, there were over 200 women, teachers, nurses, single mothers, widows, and quiet souls who'd been stepped on too long. When I stepped up to that microphone, I didn't see an audience. I saw a generation of women who'd been told to stay quiet while the world used their kindness like credit. So I told them what life had taught me in full. Kindness without boundaries is just charity for the undeserving. Grace is free, but peace has rent. And baby, when they tell you you're not invited, make sure you own the building next time. The crowd rose to their feet like a choir that finally found its song, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't just speak to be heard. I spoke to be remembered. When I got home that evening, the house smelled like lemon oil and quiet victory. Max had left a note on the table. "Ma, went to meet Lena for dinner. Not to go back, just to talk. You were right. Some things need peace, not punishment. Love you. Max." I smiled, folding the note carefully and sliding it beside that old photo she'd returned. Maybe the story wasn't done after all. Maybe it was just evolving. As the night settled, I stepped out onto the porch with my sweet tea and said to the stars, "They told me I wasn't invited. But baby, now the whole world's asking for my story." The crickets sang like witnesses, and in the rhythm of their song, I heard the soft echo of my own strength, steady, holy, earned. The next few weeks felt like spring had been waiting just for me. Flowers bloomed in places I thought were dead. Birds started nesting on the porch light again, same spot they'd abandoned years ago. Even the air felt new, like peace had perfume. Max came by almost every evening after work. We'd sit on that porch, talk about everything and nothing. No anger, no ghosts, just the sound of crickets, laughter, and healing. Sometimes he'd mention Lena, not with bitterness, just with memory. "She's working double shifts now," he said one night. "Good," I replied. "Work'll build a backbone where pride used to live." He chuckled. "You think she'll ever be happy?" I looked out at the street, golden in the last light. "Baby, happiness don't come from people. It comes from peace, and peace only visits houses built on truth." One Sunday morning, I woke up to the smell of bacon and the sound of gospel on the radio. For a second, I thought time had rewound, back to when my husband was alive and Max was small enough to sit on the counter and swing his legs while I cooked. But it was Max in the kitchen now, apron crooked, grease popping, smiling proud. "Breakfast for the Queen," he said. "Boy," I laughed, "you better not burn my crown." He grinned. "Don't worry, Ma, I read the directions this time." And right then, something in my heart settled. The kind of peace you only earn after surviving storms money can't fix. After breakfast, we took a drive through town. past the church, the diner, the old courthouse where it all began. People waved, nodded, smiled. The same faces that once whispered, now respected. I turned to Max. Funny how, when you stand your ground long enough, the dirt turns into a garden. He smiled. Guess I got my green thumb from you. I chuckled. Nah, baby. You got your roots from me. The green came from Grace. That afternoon, a letter came in the mail. Not from the bank this time, from a woman named Naomi, a writer from Atlanta. She wrote, Dear Miss Helen, I saw the article about you and your house. I work for a publishing company. We believe your story could help thousands of women. Would you consider turning it into a book? I read it twice, then once more for disbelief. Me? A book? I laughed so hard the dog next door started barking. Then I whispered, Lord, you really out here giving me sequels. That night, I sat at my desk. Same one I used to write bills and grocery lists on. But instead of numbers, I wrote words. Truths. Lessons. Every scar turned sentence. Every silence turned sermon. I called it The Invitation They Couldn't Cancel. Because, baby, when you live long enough to outlast your pain, you realize they can disinvite you from the table, but they can't erase your name from the deed. Months passed. The book came out. I didn't expect much. Maybe a few folks from church would buy it, maybe some curious readers. But it spread like wildfire. Women from all over the country started writing me letters, stories of betrayal, debt, divorce, and survival. Stories that sounded just like mine, just with different names and kitchens. One letter said, Miss Helen, you made me walk out of a marriage that was killing me slow. Another said, I read your words every night to remind myself I still got power. I kept every one of them in a shoebox under my bed, a collection of voices I'd helped find their own. Then one evening, as the sun dipped low, Max came by with a surprise. He handed me a small envelope. Inside was a plane ticket. Destination, New York City. Ma, he said smiling, they want you on a talk. Show. National television. I stared at the ticket, laughing and shaking my head. Me, on TV. Lord, they gon' need a strong microphone for this voice. He chuckled. That's why they want you, Ma. You sound like truth. I didn't sleep much that night. Too many thoughts dancing like fireflies about the past, the pain, and how life can flip the script when you least expect it. Before bed, I stood at the window, looking out at the porch light still glowing. That house, once a battlefield, now a beacon. I whispered, they told me I wasn't invited, but look at God, turned rejection into recognition. Then I smiled to myself and added, now let's see what New York gon' do with Aunt Helen. New York smelled like ambition and exhaust, sharp, cold, and full of stories that hadn't been told yet. When the plane doors opened, the air hit different. Back home, the breeze carried magnolia and gospel. Here, it carried sirens and skyscrapers. I stepped off slow, wrapped in my Sunday best, gold brooch, cream coat, and a calm no city could shake. The driver held a sign that said, Miss Helen Johnson. Lord, I'd never been so proud of a piece of cardboard. At the hotel, the producer met me in the lobby, all smiles and speed. Miss Helen, we're so honored. Everyone loves your story. I laughed. Everybody loves it now that it's safe to love, baby. She blinked. Didn't quite know how to respond. But that's the thing about truth. It don't need applause, just a microphone. The next morning, they brought me to the studio. Makeup, lights, cameras, all that glitter that tries to look like grace. The host, a young woman named Rebecca, shook my hand and said, We've never had a guest with your kind of story. I smiled. That's 'cause most folks survive quiet. She nodded, eyes shining. You ready? I chuckled. Honey, I was born ready. I just didn't know I'd have to live through a storm to prove it. When those red cameras blinked on, I didn't perform. I testified. They asked about the betrayal, the foreclosure, the revenge, but I told them about the becoming. Revenge? I said, looking right into the camera. "No, baby, revenge is a spark. I built a fire." The audience leaned in, quiet, breathing my rhythm. Then I said, "They told me I wasn't invited, but you can't uninvite a woman who owns the roof." Laughter, tears, applause, all of it rolled like thunder, not the kind that destroys, the kind that wakes the world up. After the show, a young intern came up to me, trembling. "Miss Helen, my mama used to say she didn't have a voice, but hearing you," her eyes watered. "She does now." I hugged that girl tight. "Then baby," I said, "you tell your mama to sing loud. God listens better when women stop whispering." The flight home felt lighter. As the plane descended over Georgia, the fields looked like forgiveness stitched in green. Max was waiting at the airport holding flowers. Real ones this time, not apologies. He grinned. "Ma, you were amazing. The whole internet's talking about you." I rolled my eyes. As long as the bank don't call again, they can talk all they want. He laughed so hard, people turned around. That sound, my son laughing again, was worth more than every headline in the world. A week later, the talk show aired. Church folks gathered at the fellowship hall to watch. They brought peach cobbler, deviled eggs, and pride so thick it filled the room like sunlight. When my face came on screen, Pastor Daniels whispered, "There she go, our Proverbs woman with a mortgage." The room roared with laughter, and right there, surrounded by laughter, love, and lemon pound cake, I realized what full circle truly means. Afterward, I walked home alone under the soft glow of streetlights. The Jefferson Street house stood proud, every window lit like testimony. I unlocked the door, set down my purse, and looked around. No ghosts left, no bitterness in the corners. Just me, standing in the middle of everything they tried to take. I poured myself a glass of sweet tea, sat on the porch, and looked up at the stars. They were quiet, but bright, like witnesses that had finally seen justice done. And I whispered, "Lord, they told me I wasn't invited, but you reserved me a spotlight instead." The night breeze answered like a hymn, soft, warm, endless. Inside, the phone buzzed. Another letter, another invitation, another story waiting. But I didn't rush to open it. For the first time in years, I wasn't chasing anything. I was home, whole, seen, and standing tall on a deed signed with both faith and fire. They told me I wasn't invited, so I built my own table. And wouldn't you know it, baby, now everybody's knocking. Morning light came through the kitchen window like honey on old glass. The kettle hissed on the stove, and the world felt slow again, soft, earned, whole. It had been 6 months since that talk show moment, but the ripples still hadn't settled. Letters kept coming. Women from all over sent stories and thank yous, calling me Aunt Helen like we'd been kin forever. Some wrote from shelters, some wrote from office cubicles, some wrote from porches just like mine, and every word they sent felt like a heartbeat stitched back into the world. One envelope came without a return address. Inside was a folded check and a short note written in familiar handwriting. For what I owed, L. No apology, no explanation, just 3 words that felt heavier than a sermon. I sat there for a long while, the check in my hand, not because of the money, but because of the courage it took to face herself enough to send it. I whispered, "Growth don't always come pretty, but it always comes priced." I didn't cash it. I tucked it between the pages of my Bible right beside Psalm 37:7. Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. That afternoon, Max came by with a basket of groceries. He looked stronger these days, lighter too. A man finally building forward instead of backward. He leaned against the counter and said, "Ma, the publisher called. They want to do a second book. Said the first one hit the bestseller list." I laughed. "Child, I was just trying to write myself free. Didn't know the world needed a receipt, too." He grinned. "They want a title." I thought for a moment, tapping the table. Then I said, "Call it Inheritance of Peace?" He nodded. That's got your kind of rhythm." Weeks later, they sent copies of the first edition, hardcovers wrapped in gold and cream. I held one close to my chest, the same way I used to hold bills and worry. Now it was proof that the pain paid off. I signed one for the library, one for the church, and one for Lena. No note, just my name. Bold, whole, still standing. The following Sunday, Pastor Daniels asked me to speak again, not about revenge this time, about renewal. I stood behind that pulpit, the same one where I'd once cried out for answers, and I said, "Every scar you carry, keep it polished. The shine on it ain't shame, and it's survival." People will try to write you out of their invitations, but God will always send you your own envelope with your name written in victory ink. The church stood and clapped till the rafters shook, and somewhere in the back, I swore I saw Lena slip in quietly. Head bowed, eyes glistening, a ghost turned into grace. After service, she came up to me, voice trembling. "Miss Helen," she whispered, "I read your book. Every page felt like you were talking to me." I smiled. Maybe I was. She nodded, tears falling. "I wanted to thank you, not for forgiving me, for showing me how to forgive myself." I touched her hand steady. "Baby, we all just trying to find peace that fits. Yours finally looks like it's your size." When she left, I turned to Max. He didn't say a word. He just hugged me tight. And that, right there, felt like the ending I never got from the first story. That night, the porch was quiet again, just the hum of cicadas and the faint sound of a choir practicing somewhere down the street. I sat with my tea, looked up at the moon and whispered, "They told me I wasn't invited, but here I am, hosting the whole world instead." The wind carried it away, soft and sure, like heaven itself was nodding in agreement. Because peace ain't silence. Peace is when you can sit in the same house that once broke your heart and feel grateful it still stands. And baby, I still stand too. The sun rose slow that morning, gold spilling across the porch like God himself had painted it. The house was quiet, that good kind of quiet that only comes when all your storms have run out of rain. The curtains swayed gentle, the clock ticked steady, and I sat there in my robe, a woman finally unburdened by proving herself. It had been a year since that first headline, and the world had turned my story into something bigger than me. Book signings, TV spots, speaking tours, all of it just noise compared to the stillness I'd earned. I wasn't chasing justice anymore. Justice had caught up to me. That morning, Max came over early. He'd shaved, looked sharp. A good man finally standing on his own ground. He held a little envelope, smiling shy. "What's that, baby?" I asked. He grinned. "A wedding invitation." My eyebrow went up slow. "Oh? Should I brace myself this time?" He laughed. "No surprises, Ma, just honesty. Her name's Alana. She's kind. You'll like her." I opened the envelope. My name, Mrs. Helen Johnson, printed first, bold, centered. For once, I wasn't an afterthought. I was the first name on the list. Tears welled up before I could stop them. He reached out and squeezed my hand. "Ma?" he said softly. "This time, you don't need to bring a deed. Just bring yourself." The wedding was simple. Church pews, gospel choir, sunlight pouring through stained glass like forgiveness turned liquid. When I walked in, every head turned, but not in gossip, in gratitude. I took my seat near the front, hands folded, heart full, and whispered, "Thank you, Lord, for letting me see what peace looks like in a white dress." During the reception, Lena showed up quietly at the door. No grand entrance, no drama, just a small bouquet in her hands. She waited until after the toasts to approach me. "Miss Helen," she said softly, "I just wanted to say thank you." "For what, baby?" I asked. "For not letting me stay the same." I smiled. "Growth always starts with pain, sugar. You just had yours early." She nodded, eyes glassy. "You really changed my life." I patted her hand. "No, baby, you changed it. I just built the mirror." As the sun dipped low, Max and Alana danced slow to an old Sam Cooke song. The light hit them just right. Two people who'd learned to love with lessons intact. And I stood there in that church hall, watching joy move through generations like inheritance with no paperwork. Later that night, back on my porch, I sat with a slice of leftover cake and a heart so light it almost floated. The moon shone bright, steady, silent, like a witness signing its name. I whispered, "They told me I wasn't invited. But baby, look how many tables I built since then." And that's when I knew. This wasn't a story about revenge anymore. It was a story about resurrection, about how a woman can lose everything she gave and still rise with twice the grace and 3 times the power. Because when they close a door, God don't just open a window, He hands you blueprints for a whole new house. The clock struck midnight. I finished my tea, leaned back in my chair, and let the crickets sing my closing credits. Kindness ain't weakness. It's just quiet until it strikes. They fed me lies, but I fed 'em consequences. God don't sleep, baby. He just waits his turn. And as the night wrapped around me like an old hymn, I said it one last time, the line that carried me through every betrayal, every headline, every sleepless prayer. They wanted my silence, so I gave them a sermon. I smiled slow, proud, eternal. This was Aunt Helen, still standin', still lovin', still learnin'.